So good to see so many of you again. Those of you who have been in one of my copyright workshops before, you know that I run around a lot, so I'm going to be over here at the computer a little bit. And my goal is to keep you awake because we're talking about digital copyright. But that's not hard because those who have seen my presentation on copyright before know that this is actually fun, exciting, and interesting because of the day and age that we live in now regarding the various forms of media. And think about that. Okay, my daughter Bethany, my older daughter Bethany, digital native. Amazing to watch her skills. Imagine what the next few years will look like with Ava. Can you imagine? I mean, what's right around the corner? And so we're challenged because we're basically in I would call it a speeding car. It's more like a rocket ship, right? Technology is going 1,000 miles an hour, and it's blasting right through the 35-mile-per-hour copyright zone. And our thing is not to slow down the educational process or to say, no, you can't do that. What we're here to teach, and today I'm going to try to help you do that in 30 minutes versus a 2-hour workshop, and I'm going to give you some resources to take with you. But the goal is to help teachers and students understand that you can use your technology to stay ahead of compliance, to be compliant, and to stay ahead of copyright. Just very quickly, as Director of Educational Technology at Soundzabound, one of my main roles, we're founded by educators, by the way, one of my main roles is to help you guys understand the truth about copyright. Whenever we founded the company back in the 90s, we never had an intention of giving copyright instruction until you started to get in trouble for what you thought was the right thing to do. And now we're seeing more and more people get cease and desist, and when they get a cease and desist, they're going, hey, I thought fair use applied. And it didn't. So I'm going to share some examples with you today. Now, raise your hand. How many of you in here are responsible in some way for communicating copyright policies and acceptable use at your location? Raise your hand. Okay, so I'm preaching to the choir today, right? Well, that's the goal. Is that in this short amount of time, I want to leave you with some resources that you can, especially share with your parents, with your principals, superintendents, everyone, especially the teachers and the students, so that they have an idea of really what you're up against here. And we can take a true look at what's going on in the 21st century with our digital skills. Very quickly, I do want to introduce you to our product specialist, Hal Fletcher, who's in the back of the room there. Hello, Hal, how you doing? Yeah. He's got the backs of all your heads. All right, and for those who are not familiar with Soundzabound, we were founded by educators, as I mentioned earlier, educators who come from the Atlanta area. And I actually come from the group of industry professionals, the music division. And what happened is, back in '96, the founding educators said, hey, there's a big need for compliant music out there. They could see the future, they saw where things were going, and they said, we really need to do copyright-safe music. But they were not musicians. So I was going to Berklee College of Music. I was writing, producing, touring, licensing music, doing copyright, doing all those things. I had a dynamite copyright attorney, entertainment attorney. His name is Alan S. Clark, and he continues to be our legal counsel at Soundzabound today. And what happened is we all got together in 1998 and incorporated Soundzabound. And I'm going to share a little piece of information with you. Has anybody ever heard of ASCAP before? The American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers. ASCAP is not the copyright police. Rather, ASCAP is your friend. Because I'm an ASCAP member, as some of the others that work with Soundzabound. And the reason that's important is because ASCAP is one of about 150 organizations that endorsed the fair use guidelines back in 1997. So you kind of see the chronology of how things came to be with Soundzabound. And just to kind of back up a little bit, especially for you new people, Soundzabound produces, and now these days we license, copyright-safe music that can be synchronized or put to videos, podcasts, multimedia, and all these things that we're teaching and are a part of your technological state standards here in South Carolina. Now, the successful and compliant media and technology program needs 3 things. And as we go around, and I do a lot of media compliance scorecards for various districts, and we've been asked to judge media festivals and competitions. We have a lot of first-hand experience both with the teachers and students, and it amazes me how many media programs are running on fair use. There's no way you can run an entire media program and do all the things you need to do solely based on fair use. So you need three things. First of all, a good understanding of fair use and the TEACH Act. We won't have time to go into all of it today, but I am going to summarize just briefly what I call baseball points. It's the 4 bases, so that you can effectively communicate that with your teachers and students. And then also procedures for a permissions process. Wow, how many of us are actually asking for permissions to use certain pieces of work? Now, don't get me wrong, because I love fair use. I endorse fair use. I use fair use every day, love it. But you have to know whenever you're crossing the line between fair use and having to get permissions. Over the last 10 years, we've seen an alarming amount of students get out of school, start a business, go to work for a company. Guess what? I've seen it firsthand at our own company. And what do? Bring a $2 million lawsuit against the company. Why? Because they were doing what they were taught in Ms. Jones's class. And I see you, I told you I was preaching to the choir, didn't you? You're all out there shaking your heads. So yeah, we really need to teach them a permissions process. Now, I usually end with this little story, but because I think it's so important, I'm going to go ahead and tell you this right now. I was teaching a workshop at the Q conference out in California, and that's their statewide technology conference in Palm Springs. It was a class about this size. I went through the 50-minute breakout session. At the end of the session, I threw out a what would you do scenario. And in that scenario, and one of the questions, 90% of the class said, in this case, we would claim fair use, we would take our legal and ethical chances and roll with it. And I said, why would you do that? Answer, because we have to educate. And then a lady who was a part of the 10% that said, no, we wouldn't claim fair use in this instant, we would seek permission. She turned around and said, well, let me explain a little something. She said, I do a media program that involves video production. It starts at the fall of every school year. We release the video in the spring. And this video gets a lot of exposure, so we have to, it goes online. We have to, make sure that we cover our bases in terms of compliance. And the student who was in charge of the opener of the video, which that's a big job, he was the executive producer of the video and really had to kick it off to get people's attention, had brought in some copyrighted music. And she asked, do you have permissions to use that music? And he said, no. So she said, all right, well, let me ask you this. Do you think that this song is critical to your opener in order to get that attention? He said, absolutely. So she told the class, she said, so his job when he came to class was to get the permissions. A part of some of his homework assignments was to get the permissions. And someone in the group there asked, how long did that take? And she said 4 months. So the majority said, see, 4 months. She said, no, you're missing my point. He sent the emails, he made the phone calls, he did the research. Of course, this was a high schooler. He contacted business and legal affairs at the labels and publishers. She said, my point is, if the goal is to educate, who learned more, my student or yours? And I wanted to pack it up and take it with me, right?